Hi, I'm Pascal with Royal Studios in Switzerland, and a while ago I went to Austin, Texas to pick a drum set that the A&F Drums Company made for me. I think that probably A&F drums are the sexiest drums on the market today, so I was really happy to be able to meet with Ramy Antoun, the head of A&F Drums, for an interview. I could also film a little bit of the making of these drums, so I hope you'll enjoy it. Sorry for my French accent, and thanks for watching. See you soon.
I was born in Egypt, and my family migrated in the 70s. And so I grew up in California, but I spent a lot of time back and forth in Egypt. Summer times usually with grandparents. So learning music early was learning Eastern rhythms first. So I grew up listening to Eastern music, and it's funny when I got exposed more and more to American, like Western music, 4/4, that time signature was odd to me.
Okay.
So that was kind of a new. So I give that example because I feel like I started listening to things in different ways at an early age, different instruments rhythmically, doumbeks versus kick and snare, rit versus a tambourine. So it started that way, but I grew up in California. And I have conservative parents. They wanted me to be a doctor or an attorney, so I went to school. I got good grades and ended up going to law school for a little bit. But ultimately, I've been playing music my whole life. I was 3 years old when I started playing drums.
Wow.
And in my home, my father played piano, and as long as I stayed academically focused, I could play music, and that was fine. So as a hobby, it's great, but it doesn't go outside the house. I didn't play with my first band until college, but I've been playing drums since I was 3.
Oh, wow.
So it was kind of an interesting, and I say band is like an American band. I played with my dad, but so it was definitely not on my radar. And then I left law school, jumped in a van with a bunch of guys, and started touring, playing music. It was like the most irresponsible thing I could do at that time. Disappointed everybody because here, I was supposed to be an attorney, and he's in a van with a bunch of guys playing music. What is he doing? He's throwing his life away, But I was pursuing a passion in music, and I'd always loved rhythms and songs and rhythms for songs. It was always about the song, even at an early age. And I never took lessons. I would come home from school, turn the radio on, and just play every song I heard on the radio. So I was a drummer for every song that came on, That's what taught me to play drums. I didn't even start reading music until I was doing sessions in LA for a season and realized I needed to learn how to read. It's the truth. So yeah, I toured, lived in vans and on people's couches and did the whole thing. And it only fueled my passion more for drums. And I remember getting a job at a cartage company in Los Angeles. Cartage meaning that we would take the drums of professional drummers to the studio when they have a session. We set them up, we tune them. Drummer does a session, John Robinson or Kenny Aronoff, whoever. They do the session, and then when it's done, gather the drums, put them in the cases, take them back to the shop. Okay. That was my first job in LA as a musician, And I remember the shop where all these drummers kept their drums. There were drums everywhere, but also the shop owned a lot of drums. And so I would ask the owner if he was okay if I could stay in the evenings in the shop and just learn about all the drums that were there. And in the process, my return would be I would clean the drums for the shop, if I could just take them apart and learn about them. Mm-hmm. And the owner was very gracious, said, yeah, that's great. So I would finish my shift maybe at 10 o'clock at night, and I would be in the shop till 4 or 5 in the morning, taking apart drums, learning about the drum, tapping it, changing the head. What does this wire do? Why did they make this drum this way? Was this intentional, or were they cutting a corner? What? I was fascinated by what made a drum sound a certain way. Mind you, I'm not a craftsman, I'm a drummer. But I was learning about the designs. I was learning about what it was that made a certain drum sound a certain way. I know that now, I didn't know that back then. And then in that same space, I was introduced to vintage drums. And I remember getting a 1960s Pioneer Ludwig wood snare 6-lug, nickel hardware. It was like, or so early 60s. And I thought, man, this sounds different than the other drums in here. It's a little different. What's going on here? And of course, every paycheck, man, every paycheck, buy a vintage drum. Buy a vintage drum, you know, like pay your rent, have some money for food, and then buy a drum. Don't spend on anything else. And I started to build this collection of vintage drums. Meanwhile, as a player, I was very serious about playing to songs. And so I would join as many bands as I could, because as a broke musician, I figured if I could have 7 bands that I play with, and I can get them each to rehearse a different day, I could rehearse in a rehearsal studio 7 days a week for free. And I would learn, and I could learn the different styles of what people, and really be a servant to the song versus check out my drum, you know? And it was, man, I was in like a progressive, crazy rock thing over here, and then this was a Latin thing, this was a Persian band, this guy was a singer-songwriter. It was all over the map. And instead of bringing my same kick drum, snare drum, hi-hat to each one, I had this vintage collection I was building, and I would go, okay, this works with this, let's put this together and see what happens. And so it was both playing, but also painting, like what were gonna be my colors for that day. And ironically, I started to develop a relationship and maybe an awareness with people that, oh, that guy really does want to know what my song is doing. He wants to, he just doesn't want to show up and play what he plays. He's really interested in hearing what I want. And then, you know, some of those bands would go in the studio, go in and record. Oh wow, he records well. Like, I was learning about myself as a drummer, that, you know, I could do things like that. I could listen to a song, go in there with the metronome, and be done two takes in. And
wow, is it a natural thing for you, the metronome?
I didn't know that though, because growing up, I didn't have an opportunity to play with other people. It was only my father.
Okay.
So not until literally the first session I did was an engineer producer for the Beach Boys somehow found a band I was playing with and wanted to record us. And as most producers should do in the beginning, it's like, hey, I'll use my musicians, just bring the songwriter in. And the songwriter really fought, like, hey, you should check out the drummer. I think he will work. And so graciously he said, okay, we'll try one song with him. And, you know, I understand, that's an expensive experience to go in the studio. You have to cut thousands of dollars a day. And I went in and I played, and he said, man, you need to pursue this. This is in you. But you need to hear that from people. Because if you don't know, then you don't know. But yeah, so I was able to figure out, oh, I could hear a song, and naturally I have a natural bent towards songs, and playing to a click was natural for me. Wow. Even like, which again, I was learning about myself. A producer would say, hey, can you get a little on top of the click? I was like, oh yeah, sure. And you know, you do it. Oh, no, pull your snare a little behind, drag it a little bit, but keep your kick on top. Oh yeah, sure. And I was like, oh wow. Thinking, yeah, everybody can do that. That's normal.
That's pretty special. I mean,
I didn't know that.
So you realized that you had those special abilities.
It probably wasn't until like my 6th session.
Okay.
To where it was like, you know, I don't want it to sound like bragging. I think what it was, I was discovering, man, there was this hidden gift I was given, and I never really understood it and got to use it, and now I get to enjoy it. And so I was appreciating that I had that. I wasn't trying to boast. And then immediately was the responsibility of, okay, what are you gonna use it for? What are you gonna do with this? And so I think there's lots of things. I discovered I could create a livelihood with playing drums in the studio, that could actually fuel a career. It could allow me to have a family and build some of those things as a man that I wanted, you know? It gave me another language with other great musicians. I could join other great musicians and have a common bond. that immediately allowed us to play together. And I really enjoyed that, the camaraderie, the community of it. And then, of course, if you do it well and you stick to it, you're diligent, you work hard, you build a career and you have extra resources. And you can do whatever you want with those resources. And for me, I always had a bent towards benevolence, but getting involved in something that was greater than what was in my direct circle. And for some reason or other, I was always, information was always available about people or things in need in my community. And so I'd figure out what portion of that could I contribute to. And that to me was kind of a well-balanced life that I wanted. That's what I was going for. And sometimes you'd hit that pocket and it was great, sometimes you wouldn't. And being in the music business, it's sporadic. Yeah. And so, but at least there was a kind of like a plan. It's not always the best plan and didn't always work, but at least there's something. And so music provided that plan for me. But not without lots of work and commitment and understanding and research. So that was my history.
Just a question about practicing.
Yeah.
You just mentioned working hard. For a natural musician like you, how do you practice? What kind of thing did you practice back in the days?
Yeah, the most important one I would say first was listening to music, different music, all kinds of music, because that's information input. As you get all this information, I would say for me, consciously or subconsciously, when I go into a session and I would hear things, I'm drawing from this catalog of stuff that I've heard. Sometimes I don't even know where that's coming from. I'm like, oh, that was cool. Where did I do that? I didn't think about that before. But subconsciously, I'd be listening to music and somebody did that somewhere on those records that I listened to and then pulled from it. So listening was number one. Two, I really loved playing with songs. I have a hard time, I always had a hard time just practicing. Like, I'm gonna work on this hand, I never did that.
Really? So how do you work on your independence, or you just play and it...
I would hear the song, my independence was Sting records. I would listen to Sting and go, okay, what's Vinny doing here? What's Manu doing here? Is that loops or is he really doing, okay, so even if it is loops, what if I tried to really do all of those things? No, that didn't work. But I'm not thinking about the notes, like what is this left hand doing? I'm just going, okay, how do I execute this thing? This feel that's happening, how do I execute that? It's I was a very primitive approach.
Do you think it's linked to the oral tradition of your Egyptian culture, where you first got in touch with music just through listening?
Yeah.
So not through books or through parts or through...
I would 100% agree. I think that my approach to learning rhythms is directly linked to how I heard music. Like what my exposure to music was at an early age was just listening, was hearing it. I just try and show up. So I try to spend one day a week in the studio, and usually I'll come into our shop, I'll look around and I'll start with one drum. Like, oh, okay, what would I play with this drum? And I'll look around and just kind of gather a few things. And if I can't hold them all, usually, or somehow, if it's too much stuff, then it's too much, but, not all the time, some of the time. But yeah, I'll just grab one thing and build something around it, and I'll go in the studio, I'll set it up, get the mics all going, and then I'll go, okay, and I'll just sit down and start playing. I don't want to think about it, I want to plan it. And then usually I'll play 5 or 6 different things, and then I'll stop. I won't play more than an hour.
Okay.
And that's it.
So the first creative step for you is to basically create your instrument.
Yeah, build the tools. What are the tools I'm grabbing for the day? And like you said, it's funny that your interpretation is really cool. I try and find something wacky. One thing has to be has to be different than what I'm used to, because otherwise it won't force me to do something different. And so, yeah, like, you know, we've got to, every time I see something on Instagram that's quirky, I try getting one in the shop. And usually things will come here and they'll sit for a while before but one of those days I'll come in and go, oh, what? Give me that thing. Let's see. Okay, let's go. You know?
I see.
It is very, very, because now we are running a company and there is a lot of routines daily that need to happen to keep this healthy. That space, the creative space, I leave completely avant-garde, like completely interpretive. And some days I feel like, man, that sucked. And other days it's like, wow, that was really fun. It was cool, you know? But I have to have freedom in that space because that's important, you know?
This creativity, that kind of natural flow, this is something I can feel in what you do with A&F as well.
Oh, thanks, man.
Yeah, it's the beauty of those drums, but also the adventurous aspect of them. Could you please elaborate on that? It's like it's a natural extension of your creative journey, basically.
I think one of the biggest, and I've learned this now in the last year, one of the biggest advantages, in my opinion, is that we were not supposed to be a company. We were supposed to be me, asking someone to join me, a friend, and helping make the drum that I've always wanted to have.
Okay.
It was always, I know it sounds awful, but it was always selfish. I wanted this drum that over the years I'd heard the sound in my head, but wasn't able to buy the drum that had that sound. And it wasn't that I wasn't able to buy a great drum. There's so many beautiful drums being made right now. It was just, there was a specific sound and I couldn't find it in the market. And so I thought, okay, we can do this. I have some designs. I have one specific design. I want to pursue it. Interviewed some different builders, found a builder that happened to live close to my house. A mutual friend introduced us. He had never worked with metal before, just wood. And he was a full-time guy, a job, this was a hobby. But I saw the drums he was making with wood, amazing attention to detail, and I enjoyed him as a person. And so I said, okay, I got this design. I really want to make this drum. This is special to me. I have this lug that I've had for 12 years. Okay. We're going to start here and then we're going to go. And so 6 months, and I drove him crazy because it was very particular. But then we made one, and then we made a second one. And it was like, wow, we did it, man. This is awesome. Thank you. And, you know, have a great day, you know. But then, you know, we posted pictures and it went. And so the genesis is now, over the years as a session drummer, all those sounds I've had to recreate, I'm making the drums of them. So I used to have to, I would listen, like I was saying earlier, to a track. Sometimes when you go in and do a session, there's already electronic drums and loops and stuff. And so I'd say, well, what do you want to keep and what do you want me to play? And sometimes it's like, well, we're going to keep these 3 loops, but you play the main kit. I was like, okay, what if I could create those loops live? Like, what if I could go in and create analog versions that nobody else has because I'm playing them here. Oh, that would be amazing, but how are you going to get the sounds? I mean, those sounds fit, and so I was like, okay, well, let's figure it out. Let's take apart this, you know. That's when it happened. Start taking apart drums in the studio to come up with the sound of that snare drum or that bass drum. Let me listen to that again, okay. Oh, you know what, this rack tom, I know it's a rack tom, but this rack tom, if you put it sideways and I just hit it with a mallet like this, and I have this little snare up here that I can play with a brush, listen to this loop. Put the mic right here, put the mic right here, and then it happened. It's like, oh, you can play these things 10,000 different ways to get those sounds. And so that's what happened. And then I was like, okay, well, hey, we want you to do that in a live show. Well, that's different because there's not 3 different takes we could do. You got to do it. So now what are you going to do? All right, so we have the main bass drum. Maybe I could set another bass drum here, run a remote pedal over there, and it's bass drums and snares, the main loops, and so let's get 4 different sounding snare drums set up. So we'll do 2 kicks, 4 snares, and we need a crash cymbal, and maybe like a rack tom and a floor tom. So okay, this covers the basis. Now let's learn where to go to the loop, where to go to the other part, where to mix it, and so everything that we're making here is hopefully going to allow other drummers to paint live what they've done in the studio, and even now take in the studio and then take live, you know. So it's opening up the opportunity to explore drum sounds. After time and time again having to create sounds in the studio, you start to realize that there are no rules, that these drums, a drum can make a variety of sounds. And so the challenge now was more about, all right, every time we make a drum, I want you to tell me how many things that the drum can do. How many things can we make this drum do? And if it's one thing, okay, that's fine, but I don't believe it, because I've been in the studio and I've taken the simplest, and you can. So how many things can we create out of this one sound? And how easy can it be? Okay, well, to do that, we have to make components that are very simple, and that it's like Legos. If you make different fitting Legos for every structure, they'll never work together to do anything. But if you go, okay, what is our universal element? The Lego has the circle. That's a universal component. Every Lego has the same exact diameter circle and the top part. So now the possibilities are limitless. Okay, so what is that for us? Well, it's our lug and our mounting brackets. So anything that holds a drum up or holds it sturdy in any way, shape, or form has to be interchangeable. I was like, well, that's easy. We use one size of hole and one size of brass, and only that, nothing else. Okay, so that's our rule. Whatever we make has to be made with this thing, and that way everything's interchangeable. Yeah. And then, you know, the snare concept, that's not my idea. I was privileged enough when I was doing sessions in LA. I had the opportunity to meet Jim Keltner and also do a session with him. And I remember he came in with his drums, or they brought his drums in, and all of his drums, this is probably 1999, all of his drums had snare wires on them. I was like, Jim, what? That's awesome. Like, what is that? And, you know, it's like, that's my snom. You know, it's a tom with snare wires. And
that was custom made for him?
Yeah.
In the days back?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I just thought, of course, because I'm playing the tom and I want a different sound. There it is. I just did the different sound. Like, that's all I did. Yeah. And so now you took a rack tom and a floor tom and you gave them 2 more sounds immediately. All you have to do is move your hand and flip the snares on. And it was just like, that's brilliant. We're going to offer that on every drum that we make. Anybody can make any drum that they buy from us a snom. Even the bass drums. We're figured out a way to make that work now, which we'll post later. But yeah, so adding ways for every single drum to have a variety of voices, but with a simple application, so that it's not tedious, you know? So that's it. That's the gist of it, you know? And I think, again, the opportunity to provide tools for drummers to explore, that's the most exciting part. That was the most exciting part for me as a professional drummer in the studio, was exploring sounds and then creating a groove with those sounds. So it's exciting to offer that same enjoyment, hopefully, to other drummers. Go, hey, explore. Yeah. Explore. And if you have ideas, send them and we'll try it. But don't stop exploring. Don't stop at rack tom, floor tom, bass drum, snare. Don't stop there. Turn it around and have some fun. Like, you can create some beautiful things. Don't let all the electronics have the fun. Because they can have lots of fun too and distort sounds and get crazy. You can do that too. Okay. But you also have feel, a human feel. Yeah. Most programmers are trying to get that. They got the sounds, but they're trying to get the feel. So if you get the sounds, you already have the feel. The aesthetics of our drums is something that I definitely champion and drive really hard. I love simple, but simple only works if it's great ingredients. It's like a chef. Any chef will tell you, give me 3 to 5 really fresh ingredients and I will create the most amazing meal that you ever tasted with just the 3 or 5 ingredients, you know? It's the same thing. Give me really good brass, good wood, and good leather, and a team that's, you know, that's meticulous about their work. They really take a pride in what they do, and you create something simple. But the design for me is definitely, we call it old world craftsmanship, new world sound. And it really is. I was always fascinated. Turn of the century instruments, turn of the century anything was very fascinating to me. It just felt like people's hands were more on the things that they were making. There was such a craftsmanship to them that was admirable. And I learned that when I was taking apart vintage drums all those years and learning about them and understanding them. And so it was important for me to try and get back to that if I was going to make, again, we started out with, I'm going to make a drum for me. So spare no expense, but let's do something that I'm really proud of for myself. And it has to sound, that sound has to happen. And so the lug idea was always in my head. And I remember when I was working in the beginning with my friend, he kept coming back with different things, and I said, man, I know this sounds super simple, almost stupid, but I really want my lug. This is what I want. I don't want to change it. I don't want any detail. I don't want anything. This is what I want. Like, I want this, and then we're not going to budge. And I want this brass tube going right through the center of it. I want it free. Like, we have to do it this way. And it was great. Like, he totally got it too. And when we finished it, he was like, man, this is beautiful, you know, and it sounds great. But yeah, I was taking from what I learned, that Art Deco era of beauty, and rolling it into a simple concept and a practical application. So that's what it is. Our 3 pillars are simple concept, practical application, brilliant sound. I mean, that's how we do it.
Oh, wow.
So,
how much of the final product we see today is actually the result of errors or chance or discoveries that you were not like envisioning in the first place?
yeah. It's funny, you know, I would say the first 6 months of designing was a battle to get to what I really wanted. There was probably 20 opportunities along the way to compromise, to go, okay, well, maybe that can't be done. Let's just do. And I was like, nah, I don't really care. Like, we'll just wait. We'll keep waiting. We'll keep trying. I'm not in a hurry to make this drum, so maybe this is my, you know, my Mona Lisa. Like, maybe this is my Sistine Chapel. I don't know, but we're just gonna do it exactly the way that I want it, or we're not gonna do it. So interestingly, the battle was there. It wasn't that through experiences we learned to make it better. It was like, no, we didn't get to that place of what I wanted for a while until we got there.
Yeah.
But once we got there, then I was like, okay, we're not changing anything now. Now we have a company now, how do we keep doing this at this level? And that's where we started to learn some things. And then with the drum kits, experimenting with wood shells and different wood shell companies, and do we make it ourselves? What does that entail? Can we partner with someone that already makes it and have them make our formula? What's our formula? You know, those things took a little more time.
Yeah.
And then once we got onto production, we're actually doing more stuff. Now we had more refining. So drummers, including ourselves, would go, hey, you know what? If you just I was doing this thing and it was doing this, or I did this thing and something was, I was like, oh, that's interesting. Let me look at that. And so through a variety of different, you know, input, feedback and also mistakes here. Like sometimes, I remember on our bass drum spurs, you know, we used to mount them out here on a drum. So you had the bass drum, we used to mount them out here and make longer brass rods, and that worked fine, but it was a little bit wobbly because you had long brass, solid brass, and then Tabor, by accident, misplaced the bass drum spurs one day where they were closer. And we're like, oh man, now we gotta throw this shell away and start over, you know? And so, but he said, well, what if I made smaller? I was like, I don't know, man. But he made smaller spurs. So that, what, you know, from that to this, what you realize is this much of a brass rod is a lot stronger, stiffer. Yeah. Doesn't move, doesn't bend, doesn't wobble. And we put it on the drums and we beat the crap out of that bass drum to see, you know, like, is this gonna go? I have a heavy foot, so it was easier, just sit there and play. And it was better than the other one. I was like, great. Your mistake is now, you know, what we do.
The standard, yeah.
Same with the cowbell mount. Tabor had read on our worksheet that there was supposed to be a big badge on the bass drum. Well, what we meant was a big badge on the bass drum is actually on the head of the bass drum. He thought it was on top of the bass drum, so he drilled 2 big holes for a big badge like that big. Okay. And I was like, Tabor, what? Why is there 2 holes? He's like, well, it's for the badge. I'm like, dude, the badge is like this big. He's like, no, this one says big drum. I was like, no, that's on the head. And so we're like, oh man. And see, the problem is when we make our own wood shells, it takes 4 weeks. So if you drill 1 hole, that's 4 weeks. You start over.
Wow. Yeah.
I was like, okay, what are we doing here, man? I was like, okay. And he was like, what if I made a cowbell holder? So I took the bottom hole and we put the badge like we normally put, so you just add another hole there, and then use this hole and put a cowbell holder. I was like, oh, we gotta try it first, and I gotta make sure the customer wants that, you know. We tried it, and I was like, wow, this is actually really cool. The customer's like, dude, that's awesome, thank you. It's like, all right, we introduced cowbell holders, you know.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, that was another accident. And there's been other little things. You know, we make a deep snare drum, a 9x14, and Nikki once, you know, we drill all of our lugs in the center of the drum, and she accidentally drilled the snare throw in the center as well. Normally, we have a set height from the bottom of a snare drum up where you put the snare throw on all the drums. Yeah. And so she had drilled it higher, and I thought, well, yeah, it's a mistake, but hold on. So this is a deep drum, so when you set it on the snare stand, you know, it's down here, and the way that we drill, someone would have to actually reach all the way down.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So you actually, that's exactly where it should be. Mm-hmm. Change them all. You know? And so that's how we did it.
So Ramy, I just asked you if you have any preference for one of your drums.
Yeah.
It seemed to be quite hard for you to choose one of them, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that because it's like saying, which child do you love the most, you know? But, so it's not that I have a preference, but the thing that I appreciate about this drum is there's not a lot of 15-inch snare drums being made. It's not a common size. But one of my favorite vintage drums is a 4x15 Ludwig, 20s Ludwig, nickel over brass. And mine was a 6-lug, which I loved. And as I started to tour more and I didn't take that drum on the road, I was looking for other 15-inch drums, and I found maybe 2. I know that Tama made one for Kenny Aronoff, which is a cool drum too, and it's engraved. And then I think Ludwig just started making one, maybe in the last couple of years. But ultimately, I couldn't find a 15. And so when we started the company, I was like, I'm making 15-inch snare drums. Like that's gonna be, and I'm gonna make it special and make exactly the 15-inch that I've always wanted in my head. And so this is 3.5 by 15. It's actually a little shorter. For what that does is it eliminates a little bit more of the shell ring. So you get a lot more of a splatty sound. And then I have this old Turkish coffee I don't know what it's called. In Arabic, it's called a kanika, but it's what you make Turkish coffee in. And the handle was European walnut. It's beautiful European walnut. And so I talked to our wood guy and said, hey, look at this. What is this? And he said, oh, that's European walnut. I'm like, great, let's get some. He's like, no, it's very expensive. It's very hard. And I was like, oh, but you know what? This is a drum size that I've always wanted. We can make this a limited drum because that wood is limited. And so, but let's do it. Let's invest the money, and this will be an expensive drum. It is what it is. We'll only make 100 of them. And so that's what we did. This is European walnut hoops. By the way, they don't sound different than regular walnut, which is a lot cheaper. Okay. It's just the idea of historically where I'm coming from and the design. It's special. That's all, you know. And so this has a special nature because it kind of ties in a lot of things that I enjoyed about 15-inch snare drums that I wasn't able to find. Yeah, so 3.5 by 15 European walnut hoops. It has an amazing tuning range. Every, you know, whether it's low, mid, or high, or in between, has a different character in the drum. And I love that, you know. I end up tuning it low a lot because I like that really fat, splatty sound.
I had a chance to play it yesterday, and honestly, this one is next on my list.
Yeah, I understand. It's a different.
If you have any left, maybe.
Drum. Yeah, no, we will. I think we've only sold about 26 of these, whereas the 4x14, I think that's gone. I think we're done. But yeah, and this is number 0.
Excellent. What do you envision for the future? I mean, what's on your heart now?
Yeah, I know that there's lots of drum-related things in the future. I know that, but you just said what's on your heart now. It's actually not. I mean, we have some things that we're working on in the drum world, and I'm very excited about them, and they will come. But I'm also in a place where I feel like there is a really sweet drum community on social media, and the community spans the globe. You have Indonesia, Japan, China. I mean, it's everywhere. It's amazing, and you could write something in 10 seconds, push a button, and everybody has access to it. You know, so I thought, I wonder if there was something that collectively, as a community, we could champion that had nothing to do with drums, but had something to do with humanity. I don't know. I feel like we're in a position where we should start to think about, as a drum company, we should think about, hey, what can we do outside of our little circle here that could contribute to somebody's well-being or somebody's livelihood, something like that. And then I thought, well, what about as a community? I wonder if we'll do the research. Maybe we find something and we present it. Hey, we've researched this thing and check it out. This family could live for X amount of dollars a month if we all gave 50 cents. Hey, other drum companies or whatever, you know, like, could we all unify on something and together as a community go, yeah, like we are helping that family exist. And here's their plan. They have a plan. It's not just never ending, but in a year, they're gonna do X, Y, and Z, and then in 2 years, X, Y, and Z, and all we have to do is continue to provide that 50 cents or $1, whatever it is. I don't even know what it is yet, but I know that I'm looking forward to finding something to gather around that is outside of our drum world. Historically, for myself and my family, when we've been able to do things like that, been able to be participants in the well-being of a community or a person or whatever, it's never what we expected, and it's always way better, and it always difficult. And I mean, being consistent with things like that is very difficult, but it has always brought more life into our family too. And so I'm just curious to see, you know, what.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, man.